Welcome back to Inside Sports. I'm your host, Chris Marks, continuing our conversation about horse racing right here in Maryland, and I'm pleased to be joined by not only Ted Black, but the Gaudetts, Linda and Lacey. Thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having us.
Now, I have to ask you right before we get started, how did you get involved in horse racing?
Well, as a teenager, I rode show horses and went to meet a trainer on a farm to buy a horse from him. And I always tell the story, unfortunately, I got the husband and not the horse. But 40 years later, I'm still here on the racetrack and enjoy every day of it.
Outstanding. Now, you guys both train out in Bowie at the training center. And I want you both to take me through a typical day, because it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week thing with the horses. So what's a typical day like?
Well, it absolutely is every day of the year. I tell everybody I get Thanksgiving off and Christmas off only to cook dinner. Other than that, we're there every day of the week. Typically, we get up 5 o'clock, maybe Lacey a little bit earlier than I do. She gets to the racetrack an hour before I do. I have things on the farm. We have the farm to take care of before we get there. But it's the same routine most every day. We train 6 days a week. Sunday we'll have a walk day where the horses will just be walked around the shed row. It'll be easy day, and they actually get used to doing that, and it's a relaxing day for them and for the help. Because they work long hours and 7 days a week, it's tough on the help, and it's tough on us. But so we have the one easy day, and we train 6 days a week. We're up, like I say, 5 o'clock. On a non-race day, we're usually done by 12 or 1 o'clock. Then we come back in the afternoon for another hour, hour and a half of feed. On a race day, after we're done at Bowie training, we'll head to Laurel to the races. And if there's a horse that we want to look at, maybe to claim, or if we have a horse in, we'll be there most of the afternoon, going back to Bowie at feed time and then back home.
Now, Lacey, you ride the horses and you get there an hour early. What's your typical day like?
I get there first thing in the morning, usually between 5 and 5:30. In the summertime, we usually get there earlier. It's nicer. You actually enjoy being out there instead of cold and wet days. Usually check over the horses, make sure nobody's sick. Our horses, we spend a lot of time with them, so it's usually easy to tell if somebody didn't finish their food the night before, if they look a little dull in their stall, check a temperature or something like that. We have horses, like I said, if we run horses, we usually walk them 2 or 3 days after to let them recoup, get them out early, and then we start training the horses. I'll set tack and bandages and make sure everybody's set to go. And now we're down on horses. We have about 15 horses. So I usually do a majority of the riding. We usually have a freelance rider come in and help for a couple. And I usually either drive out for the sets, ride the pony, or we'll go in company together with 2 horses until she comes in, and then she'll do the same thing. She'll check them, go out and watch them train. You can tell a lot about where you're gonna go. If they're training well, if they're training forwardly, then you can keep on your schedule. If not, you'll come back to the barn. We'll usually sit down and evaluate. Like I said, she's the main trainer. I'm her assistant, so we'll discuss things and think about a different strategy or plan from there.
Now, a day when it's blistering hot, you're riding. A day when it's pouring down rain, you're riding. Yes. You have to go out no matter what.
Yep, we go every day. Like she said, Sundays is a nice change, because actually, just like kids going to school, when it's Saturday evening, the horses know that the next day they're going to be able to sleep in an extra hour, and they'll just be walking. They'll feel a little more energetic just walking and getting put back in their stalls, get early lunch, and at 11:30 when you walk down our barn, majority of them are sleeping, they're laying down, and it's very quiet and peaceful in the barn, and they really enjoy it. And then Monday, I'm the one that has to pay for it, because they're definitely feeling good after an easy day.
Now, how do you guys determine which horse runs in which race and what day they're going to run?
We are given a condition book by the racing secretary's office, and it's funny. As long as I've been doing this, as soon as a new book comes out, we run over, get a new book, get a pen, and we start marking races. This is a weird business. When you love it every day of your life, you wouldn't get up every day if you didn't love it. But and it's funny, if a horse runs today, and whether he runs poorly or well, you're right back at the barn 3 hours later looking at the condition book, where you're going to go the next time. You want to space them. We like to space our horses maybe a little further between races than other trainers, but we found it works better for us. We don't just spin them back, short rest most of the time. But so between 2 and 3 weeks, and then if they run twice for 2 or 3 weeks in a row, we'll give them 6 weeks off. We find that they recoup better, and you have to have a strong, healthy horse when you go to a race. So we try and position our races like we were talking the other day. The horse we have in tomorrow is Wild Lewis, and we gave him a little break, so he's been about 5 weeks since his last race, and it came up a super tough race. He's training forwardly. We have to go. I mean, he's ready to go. Whether it's it's his, the best race for him or not, we have to find out how good he is tomorrow. And because we know he's at the top of his game, we hope he puts in a good effort.
And when you guys are looking at a horse, and do you know morning of a race he's ready to go, or can you look at him and say, wow, it's going to be a tough one today because he's not looking like he's at his best?
Yes. Like I said, when you go in the morning, we pay close attention to our horses. You can kind of tell, especially day to day. I feel like riding them myself helps a lot too. You can feel how ready they are underneath of you. And especially this winter, we've had a couple of horses that we took our time with. We put them in spots where they really belonged, and they came home for us. They did great. They did everything we asked, and then some. And then that's when you start seeing horses, they build their confidence. When they win, they know. When they go back to that winner's circle and they get their picture taken, they're proud. And you can tell the next day in the barn too. When a horse gets beat, they're a little more angry the next day. And whether that's going to help or hurt them, you won't know to the next race. But they will train more forwardly, and that's when you kind of start stepping up with horses and maybe put them in a spot that's maybe a little too tough over their head. But as she was saying, if you know your horse is going to this race, that's when you got to try it.
Ted, I know when I come out there with you and we bring the camera out there, those horses love being on camera because they'll play up to it.
Yeah, you can tell. I mean, some of them just, if you're holding the camera, to their face, I mean, they'll just keep sticking their nose right into the camera for some reason, and they certainly like they like the added attention, and they're curious too, so they don't get a chance to see a microphone and a camera every day. So, when you're doing an interview and you're interviewing their trainer, then it looks like they certainly want to take part in the whole process.
It's a lot of fun out there like that. Now, I know a couple years ago you guys had concealed identity in the Preakness, and you've had some other really good horses. Can you talk about some of your horses that you've had that have been very good over the years?
Well, concealed identity was a lot of fun 2 years ago. Since he had a rough year last year, races-wise, maybe we didn't spot him quite correctly, and I think he needed to mature this year going into the last race, which he won just about a month ago, the stake race. We were pretty confident with him. We said we knew going in he's going to be 10 or 15 to 1, but he was at the top of his game, and we just felt like it was going to be his day. Then it came up a little wet, slop, which even moved him up a little bit more, and he absolutely was at his best that day. I mean, he got knocked down leaving the gate. He was wide down the backside, bumped down the stretch, and prevailed. I mean, he really did. He was determined. And he came off that race great, and he's going into this next to Harrison Johnson on Saturday in good shape. Over the years we were looking the other day, I was looking on the computer the other day at some old photographs, and we had a horse 2 or 3 years ago. His name was Streets of Brooklyn, and he came to us, and he'd been pretty spent. He'd had a lot of problems, and he came to us. And a lot of times, what happens with us is we get horses that people kind of give up on. We don't give up. We don't give up to the last nails in that coffin, really. I mean, we try everything. So he came to us in pretty poor shape. We worked very, very hard on him. He won 5 races in a row for us, and he was actually a co-favorite going into the General George 2 years ago. So I found some old photographs of him, and a big, pretty red horse, and just gorgeous. Does everything right, very smart. So when we had to retire him in December, we tried to bring him back this year, and he just wasn't going to stand to the level that was expected of him. We didn't want to make him a cheaper horse. It just wasn't fair to him. So we didn't know what we were going to do with him. Well, I said, you know what? Throw the Western saddle on him. We made a pony with him. And now he accompanies almost like Lava Man because of his class and his attitude. He can go out and have a new job and a new career, and he's enjoying it. He's enjoying life. So he's been a special horse to us. Lacey had a nice horse a couple years ago that won the Harrison Johnson.
Reckless Ways.
Reckless Ways, a horse that we had claimed for her. And he won 5 or 6 in a row, and then the Harrison Johnson.
6 or 7.
Yeah, I mean, he was just a fantastic. That was Rosie Napravnik's first stakes winner for her. And we had Star Touch which was, let's say, 22 years ago, because I had just had Gabby. I do horses when I have my children or when I was, those are, how I recall. And we had just had our second child, and we won the General George with Star Touch, another horse that they had given up on, had not won a race in 2 years, came to us all 4 shoes off and in poor condition, and we just put him back together. And he was a fantastic, fast horse. Come from behind. When he kicked into gear, watch out. He better have running room, because he was going over top of somebody. So, and it's funny, we always say the good ones, but Saturday when Lacey's, little filly was winning, we were cheering just as hard for her. It doesn't matter the level. It's when they try hard and they give you their all. We're very enthused, and when you lose that enthusiasm, you got to get out of this game, because there's certainly more disappointment than fame in this game. But that little bit of fame or whatever, it keeps you going year after year after year.
What's it like covering a horse like Concealed Identity and these other horses that you see over the years?
Well,
did you follow them not even from when they're 2, 3, 4 down the line?
Yeah, it is like Linda said. It keeps you going year in and year out. When I first started covering the races back in 1987, there was a good horse named Little Bowl John who was one of the top Maryland breds of all time. He earned almost $2 million in his career, and he was the one that got me started. And I try to follow him and just the other horses that trained at the Bowie Training Center, and follow them in races at Laurel and Pimlico and Monmouth and Philly, wherever they went to. And it's exciting seeing the owner and trainer get excited about winning races with those horses, and certainly makes it easy to cover. Unfortunately, they're like Linda said, they get beat more times than not, but when they win, you can just tell that all the effort and hard work that they put into it just really pays off, because they spend so much time around the horses. They're dedicated to the care and well-being of the horses on a day in and day out. We only see them on race day. We only see them compete for either a minute 10 seconds if they're in a 6 furlong sprint, or a minute and 40 seconds if they're in a route race somewhere. So but the owners, and especially the trainers and the exercise riders, they're with the horses, day in and day out. So when you see them win a stakes race, and I think one of the first stakes races beyond Little Bowl John that I covered was when Eddie Gaudett won Maryland Juvenile Championship with Trapline. It was a horrendous day. It was sloppy, and the horse just took to the track and came from behind and splashed through and won. And that was my first meeting with Eddie Gaudett. And then after that, they won a stakes with Leary Baba. I think right after Lacey was born, and then won the General George with Star Touch a couple years later when Gabby was born. And they've had dozens of good ones since. And
we have about 30 seconds left. Do you guys have any horses racing on Preakness Day? I know it's the biggest day of the year in Maryland, and I know maybe not in the Preakness Stakes itself, but there's a lot of races that day.
Hopefully. We'll see how well Concealed Identity runs on Saturday. I'm sure there's a race that will aim for him there. He did have a decent turf campaign a few falls ago, so he's running well in the dirt right now. We'll see what happens in the spring, whether we keep him on the dirt or maybe go back to the turf, but hopefully he'll be in a good spot there.
Outstanding. Well, I want to thank you both for being on the show today.
Thank you.
Ted, as always, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you.
And that's all the time we have here talking about Maryland horse racing. I'm your host, Chris Marks. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again right here next time on Inside Sports.